Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. If you're new to the channel, we are the 5x5 Network. We're a team of independent journalists that do our best to bring you an honest reporting on a number of political, geopolitical, current events, and policies that could affect you and everyone around the country. Um, Tonight, as my guest, she focuses on a topic that got me involved in all this: the educational system, the effects it's having on our children. She is a true voice in the fight. She puts her boots on the ground and is loud about protecting children. I'm excited to host her here at 5x5. I think you will find her information educational and sometimes shocking. Michele is a leader in this fight, and I'm grateful to know her. So I would like to introduce Michele and give her the opportunity to tell you a little bit about herself and what she does.
Thank you, Laura, and loved your intro, by the way, and happy to be here. So my name is Michele Lentz. I'm the president of an organization that was started in Minnesota called the Child Protection League, and we work to protect children from indoctrination, exploitation, and violence, and mainly through public policy. But our so we're often dealing with bills, school policy, but we're most effective in getting information out to the public and activating the grassroots, because that is what's necessary to stop uh, bad legislation and promote good legislation, is the voice of the people. And so that's where we tend to focus. We try not to be lobbyists down at the Capitol. We try to be out there with the people, informing them and activating them. And so tonight, the topic that I want to talk about is comprehensive sex education. And the reason I want to talk about this topic first, and I'll come on again and talk about a number of educational trends that we should all be aware of and actively engaging in public policy regarding those trends. This one is key because comprehensive sex ed is a tool that they are using to take down our country, and I'll prove it to you. So a few years ago, the Child Protection League coined a phrase um, called the raging war on kids. And it was part of a campaign at the time that we were undertaking, and really, unfortunately, the raging war on kids is still raging, because we could talk about any number of assaults on children through education and culture. But the reason I wanted to bring up the raging war on kids is because the raging war on kids is a long-term strategy to take down America. It's the core of the culture war. It's the core of cultural Marxism. And tonight we're going to focus on comprehensive sex ed, and I might refer to it as CSE, just for abbreviation's sake, but try to remember that that's what I'm referring to. Comprehensive sex ed is the most potent pathway to the destruction of our country. It's not the sex education you might remember when you were a kid. It's fake health education. It's a vehicle. It's a strategy to transform the culture and cause a cultural shift. So I'll switch to my PowerPoint here.
And I just put out in chat briefly, I'll say that she is very used to giving presentations. I will be here to support her, but mostly in the background because I don't want to interrupt.
Hopefully.
Michele fascinates me. I've known her for 2 years now. If there's one person that I respect a lot, it is Michele, because she doesn't just preach it, she does it. So
I appreciate that. But yeah, jump in and let me know if I screw up. It won't be the first time, and I'm sure it won't be the last. So I jumped through my PowerPoint here. There we go. So that's us. The first thing I want to tell you about this transformational education, this cultural shift, is that it's important for us to know who's behind it, right? It's important for us to know how, as we climb the ladder, you know, down at our level, parents, we just want to raise our kids and, you know, live the American dream. And then we're hit with this stuff. And at first we're just sometimes blindsided by it. You know, where did this come from? And why are they doing this? And who's behind this? And so it's important to know who's behind it. And as you go up the ladder, you know, you get farther and farther to the point of a 40,000 foot level, and you can really see the structure. And we're seeing that in our country right now. We're seeing the takedown of the machine, in a sense, the takedown of the structure of these forces. And a lot of people would not equate or include comprehensive sex ed in that structure, that subversive revolution that's taking place, but I guarantee you it's at the core of it. So the first organization I want to tell you about is SECUS, the Sexual Education, I have to move something here, Consortium of the US. And what you're seeing is their graphic. Okay, this is what they put out in January 2019, promoting their new agenda for the year. Sex ed is a vehicle for social change, full stop. That's their tagline. Sex ed.
Does that not look like it says sexed for social change?
Yeah.
Am I blind here, guys, or does that not look like it says sexed for social? Okay.
Yeah, sex ed for social change. So what does it mean? This is their words. While sex education is a necessary sexual health tool, it can and should be so much more than that. With sex education, we have a golden opportunity to create a culture shift, tackling misinformation, shame, and stigma that create the basis for many of today's sexual and reproductive health and rights issues like abortion, LGBTQ equality, sexual violence, but CSE doesn't prevent sexual violence, gender equity. And then look at that last bullet point that they put out, dismantling white supremacy. Wow.
Oh, wow.
How did we get there from sex ed? Comprehensive sex ed is derived from the Kinsey SECUS Planned Parenthood network. So we're stepping up the ladder a little bit, right? Planned Parenthood basically funded SECUS. And three people that I'm going to tell you about tonight, and some of them you'll be familiar with. First is Alfred Kinsey. The second one is Antonio Gramsci, the father of cultural Marxism. And the third is William Reich, who was an Austrian Marxist. And what they, in their own words, tell us about what their plans were, we're watching, you know, be played out in America and across the globe right before our eyes. So SECUS was established as the sex education arm of the Kinsey Institute. And there's some videos on the Child Protection League website and on our YouTube channel that explain a lot more about Kinsey. SECUS created a framework for their goals, and this is their framework. SECUS advances comprehensive sexuality education as a means of building a foundation for a long-term culture shift that will positively impact all levels of society, particularly issues of gender equity, sexuality, sexual and reproductive health, consent, personal safety, and autonomy. Well, remember that word autonomy, because that's a buzzword and it does not mean autonomy. The values of their framework, they use a rights-based framework to inform our approach, reshaping cultural and social narratives of the sexual and sexuality, reproductive health. Rights-based. So I'm going to show you how when they say rights-based, they mean rights-based, meaning everybody has a right to engage in whatever activity they want, including children. In Minnesota, they introduced a piece of legislation. It was House File 1414. We were able to stop it this year and last year. It'll come back. It'll have a new name, and we're going to have to keep fighting it. But in it, it says that schools must teach bodily autonomy. Bodily autonomy is just another word for abortion. So
yeah, and that's something you told me. By the way, I'm gonna pause there because that's something you told me. So say that again. What was that? Bodily autonomy?
Bodily autonomy is their technical word for abortion. So the bill that we stopped included language saying that schools must teach bodily autonomy. So they must teach children about their right to abortion.
And how old does that start?
Yeah, it depends. I mean, in the bill, sexuality education was going to start at kindergarten. At what level they introduced bodily autonomy, I'm not sure. I want to say it was at least 4th grade.
At least 4th grade. What is that? A 10-year-old? That's wow.
Yeah, I'll show you an example of curriculum that Planned Parenthood promotes. We'll have the pictures blurred out, unfortunately. That book in the schools doesn't have the pictures blurred out, but that right on the cover of the book says appropriate for 10-year-olds. So it's pretty sick. Let's see. So as SIECUS announced in November of 2019, their major rebranding, and it's all about social change. I mean, they just admitted it. Here's another quote for them. "We are working toward a world where all people can experience and enjoy sexual and reproductive freedom as they define it for themselves. By advancing sex ed for social change, we know that we can make that world a reality." Well, here's an example of sex ed for social change from the curriculum Be Ready, Be Real, and they teach children what dental dams are. Just Google it, really. I don't want to have to explain it. International Planned Parenthood Federation. It's another curriculum. This one put out, this document, it's a booklet put out by IPPF, and it's called Exclaim, and it's the subtitle there, Young People's Guide to Sexual Rights, an IPPF declaration. And in that book, it says, "It is important for all young people around the world to be able to explore, experience, and express their sexualities. This can only happen when young people's sexual rights are guaranteed. With Planned Parenthood, there's no such thing as right or wrong when it comes to sexuality. They teach a values," and this is CPL's quote now, "teach a values-free philosophy of sexuality to our children." So here in Minnesota, we had a bill that was going to mandate schools teach this stuff to children. And Planned Parenthood they brag that they are the biggest promoter of comprehensive sex ed, and that they are the ones that schools hire to come in and teach this if they don't teach it themselves. So when you see a values-free, this is what you're talking about it including. Okay, more from Exclaim.
Yeah, and we'll get into Planned Parenthood probably in another series as well.
Well, and there's more. Yeah, there's more here, but it's important for people to know that they're behind it. They're behind the curriculum. They're behind these laws. They're behind pushing these laws and I would expect in just about every state. I can tell you this little bit of information since you've got people from across the country who are watching. 43 states have obscenity exemptions for their schools that allow schools to teach this stuff, even if it's obscene. But about 30 states have no comprehensive sex ed mandate. And about 20 of the states do have a comprehensive sex ed mandate, like they were trying to push in Minnesota. However, just because a state does not have the mandate does not mean it's being pushed at the district level. at the county level, locally in the schools. But they're trying now, SECUS and Planned Parenthood, they're trying to get those mandates passed by law in, the other 30 states. So the roots of the matter. This is, again, from the Exclaim document on the rights of young people to have sex. So you can read that. A little bit more from that document. It talks about removal of parental involvement or spousal consent laws that prevent young people from seeking sexual and reproductive health services. And then in the white box underneath that, where it says, what does this right entitle young people to? We've underlined what it underlined in red. Any limitation on sexual rights must be non-discriminatory, including on the grounds of age. Recognition, protection, and fulfillment of young people's legal rights at all times, no matter their age, gender, or sexual orientation. Do you see where we're going with this? Okay, here was another curriculum called Healthy, Happy, and Hot, Rights, Sexuality, and Living with HIV. In this one, it said, young people living with HIV have a right to decide when and how to disclose their HIV status. Young people living with HIV or sharing your HIV status is called disclosure. Your decision about whether to disclose may change with different people and situations. You have a right to decide if and when and how to disclose your HIV status. Some of this stuff is global, so these are documents that are being put out by International Planned Parenthood, so they're pushing them globally.
Well, and aren't they also pushing to not the parents don't even have to be notified? Like if a child's struggling, like, and they make a decision upon themselves. And again, I'm going off into the trans world because I've focused on that, the skyrocketing of these kids that are coming out. They're now mandating in these states that children don't have to tell their parents. They can walk into a Planned Parenthood and walk out with testosterone.
Yep. They can have an abortion during school hours in some places, and the parent would never know that.
To me, that's horrifying.
It's a violation of a lot of rights. So I think you get the picture here, right? So I interviewed Jaco Boyens a few months ago. And what he said in the interview with me is what we have quoted here. Comprehensive sex ed in the public schools does the grooming for pimps and predators. And so we'll dig into that a little bit more, that this stuff is designed to groom children. Okay, Tumblr. Planned Parenthood had a post on Tumblr, which we thought was noteworthy. And here it is. Since the number of sexual partners you've had doesn't say anything about your character, your morals, or your personality, or about anything at all, really, there's nothing bad or unhealthy about having a big number of sexual partners. It just points to the values-free ideals of Planned Parenthood. And so keep that in mind when you consider that Planned Parenthood is behind pushing these laws in all of the states, and they stand to benefit from it because they're the biggest provider of comprehensive sex ed curriculum. Okay. Here's another SECUS framework that'll blow your mind. Another value coming from SECUS, Sex Ed for Social Change. SECUS commits to working to dismantle the systems of power and oppression, which perpetuate disparate sexual and reproductive health outcomes and incubate stigma and shame around sex and sexuality across the intersections of age, race, size, gender identity, and expression, class, and sexual orientation and ability. So now we're talking about systems of power and oppression. You wonder why we've got, Black Lives Matter and groups that are protesting in the street. They've been indoctrinated into these kinds of ideals. Okay,
And we
strategic.
discussed that briefly before we came on air about Black Lives Matter and it being originated by 3 Black lesbian women. And listen, your choice is your choice when you're an adult. But the first thing on the About Us page, one of the first things to describe them is about gender equality. It
Yeah.
doesn't say anything about Black lives, it's gender equality. So everything's being co-opted into this LGBTQ community as
Yeah.
issues that if you speak out against it, all of a sudden you're a bigot and you're a phobic to everything. These are parents, these are your children, and you shouldn't be bullied into silence for the health of your child.
So we'll see as we go up that ladder how cultural Marxism is the driving force behind that, how subverting the traditions and the ideals of America is the enemy to that, to the worldview of those people who are funding, who are driving the narrative, creating the curriculum, writing the legislation. We're just climbing up the ladder and we're getting, closer and closer to the core of what is the evil that we are dealing with here in our country and around the globe. Um,
Yeah, and Miss
so
Kitty out in chat said no religious freedom listed either.
no, no,
So, and I was started to say earlier when you talked about it didn't matter how many partners you have. It's like I wonder if they added an addendum about STDs.
right, right.
Yeah,
There,
I mean,
it's fake health. It's fake health
exactly.
what they're teaching. They're not teaching the harm of these kinds of activities. They're not being truthful about it. Okay, shape cultural and societal narratives by applying a multifaceted approach in all communications with a strong organizational website, social media presence, relevant opinion pieces, and bold position statements. I mean, we're just seeing that out in the world right now. Um,
Yeah, it's all about diversity. It's all like I just mentioned earlier. They're bullying people into staying silent. And that is why, like right now, and we've been talking here lately about like the silent majority, silent no more, is because this is what's happening by not saying something. It's almost like they're pushing the envelope. Will anybody say anything if we do this? Nope. Okay, well, let's go a little bit further. Let's put drag queens for storytime hour for 5-year-olds. And then, I mean, it's horrendous.
yeah.
That's
Stella
why I'm grateful you're
Moravito
here.
writes a lot about the psychological tactic of isolation, and how that's a human fear, isolation, being marginalized, and it's a weapon that they use. It reminds me that two phrases that you should be on the lookout for when you're hearing testimony for against legislation. They will use two phrases all the time. The first one is medically accurate. Medically accurate is a phrase that is designed to shut you up. Because if the expert sitting there is saying, well, this is medically accurate curriculum, then you're going to, people are going to be like, well, how can I stand against that when it's medically accurate? But it's not medically accurate. The other phrase that they use is age appropriate. Oh my goodness. Wait till we get to the book, It's Perfectly Normal, that says it is age appropriate for a 10-year-old. And we'll have that discussion about whether when they say something is age appropriate, are they not just lying to your face? But they use those phrases in order to shut people up so that they feel like, who am I to go against the experts? And we have had a really big education, wouldn't you agree, in the last 3 or 4 months about whether we should trust the experts anymore.
Exactly. And don't worry, Michelle's not going to leave you hanging. She's going to give you a toolkit. I'm going to go ahead and put the link out there right
Yeah.
now that she sent me. And I'll post it throughout the show, and I'm sure Pam will help me do that. But yeah, she's going to help show you also what you should be asking your schools. So
Yep.
I'm not going to leave you empty handed.
Let's see. SIECUS influences policymakers and educators through national sexuality education standards and national teacher preparation standards. They're the largest promoter of comprehensive sex ed in the country. This is digging a little bit deeper. You might think, yeah, I'm going to homeschool my kids. or I'm, which, you know, that's what I did with my kids. But, you know, maybe you think, well, my kids are in a charter school or they're in a private school, you know, so they're probably going to be safe. And I caution you, because they're not dumb enough. Sikis isn't, they know that they need to get to those children as well. So there's 2 points on that. One is the teacher preparation standards. You know, teachers have to pass certain standards, have to meet certain standards in order to get their license, and then they have to renew that or do additional educational work every few years to maintain their license. And this indoctrination is being embedded into those teacher licensure requirements. And we fought that here in Minnesota, where we tried to get them out. An administrative judge prevented the licensing board in Minnesota from including them. And so what did the licensing board do? They didn't require it as a mandate. They just made sure it was in all of the programs that the teachers had to take. So we, you know, we won the battle and continue to lose the war, because teachers are being trained that this is appropriate for children. So, and it's in the National Education Standards. You know, you're probably familiar with Common Core and all of those national standards. These
and the video,
they wrote the standards.
And some of the videos that have come out of teachers just bawling in front of the student council members, and I mean, and quitting their jobs from the things that they're told, that they're forced to teach these children, and they just can't in good standing do it. Yeah. And have been teachers for 10, 15 years.
Yeah. And if the teachers won't do it, the school can bring in Planned Parenthood. They'll be happy to do it. And so, you know, they seem to have a multifaceted approach to this. Okay, transformational education. Here's a quote from Ed O'Sullivan, the director of Transformative Learning Center in Toronto. Transformative learning involves experiencing a deep structural shift in the basic premises of thought, feelings, and actions. It is a shift of consciousness that dramatically and permanently alters our way of being in the world. So I want to ask you, in that statement, did you hear anything about reading, writing, or arithmetic? That is the framework of modern education. Such a shift involves our understanding of relations of power in interlocking structures of class, race, and gender. As educators, get this, as educators, we are not purveyors of knowledge. We are designers and participants in environments and processes. That's what they're training teachers to be. Okay, Antonio Gramsci was an Italian Stalinist writer in the 30s. He believed that culture, not economics, was the center of the revolution. And so that's key, because you had Karl Marx, you know, was promoting a economic Marxism. Gramsci said, no, that's not how you take down the society. You take it down through cultural Marxism, through a cultural revolution. And he said the group that controls social institutions controls the rest of society. Political power is built on cultural power. So we're going up that ladder a little bit. So, you know, who is driving the ideals that are embodied in SICUS and Planned Parenthood and transformative education? Who's driving those ideals? It's the cultural Marxists. Gramsci, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and look at the years, the 70s. So every time you say this has been going on, this is why the teachers now are the way that they are. And then they have children that are teachers that are the way they are. This has been going on for decades.
Yeah. Yeah.
They've been building to this.
Gramsci, it might be on the next slide. He coined a phrase called the slow march through the institutions. And when you hear that phrase, I mean, just think of all the institutions that we have seen become infiltrated with equity, with diversity, you know, with all of this. And you wonder why this is happening. It's by design. So radical subversion of the culture creates revolution. He's the father of multiculturalism or the culture wars. He believed that if you infiltrated, you needed to subvert the universities, the churches, the media, the arts. And that's what cultural Marxism is. The primary strategy to create social change by changing the way we think and speak. For example, mandating the use of gender-inclusive pronouns transforms a child's concept of two sexes. I would go further to say when you take a 5-year-old and you introduce the concept of multiple pronouns and the concept of gender fluidity, you do a lot more harm than that. And I don't know, in my personal opinion, if society will survive the mental health issues of a generation of children who have been taught that.
We're already seeing it
when they
now.
grow up.
Well, look, we're already seeing it now. Look at, I mean, Antifa and the college students that are coming out hating their own country. Like, I mean, you know, when asked, I mean, this is the best country on the planet. Where else would you rather live? But you have these college and high school kids talking about how horrible of a country this is. That's what they're teaching them in school, is that America is horrible.
Yeah. Yeah. David Horowitz has been on the forefront of educating us on what's been happening at the universities. And so this is the ideology behind their, you know, their viewpoint. So the goal of transformational education, according to Gramsci, the goal is the total transformation of culture and society in order to create the worldwide, it should be worldwide Marxist state. Bill Clinton's intellectual guru. Okay. Old narratives must be replaced with new ones. So old narratives, you know, we're seeing, I guess this is being played out right this summer, you know, Independence Day, Christmas, Easter, those are the things that got to go. The new narratives are global warming, white supremacy, Islamophobia, transgenderism, all sexuality is good and necessary. You know, I read that it's almost prophetic because we created this PowerPoint last year before all of what started, you know, happening over the summer. I mean, it's just at a fever pitch right now, but this stuff is pervasive. Okay, so let's go on to Wilhelm Reich, another Marxist, another thought leader behind what is driving the curriculum and the policies that are affecting our schools. He was an Austrian psychoanalyst, a Marxist, and a sexual revolutionary. He lived in the early 1900s. He was extraordinarily influential, and his idea was to sexualize the culture. He believed that you could free yourself of repressive sexual morality, live out your urges, and create the paradise of a society free of domination. The result would be the extermination of the churches and the traditional state. His cultural revolutionary breakthrough bore fruit, obviously, in the 1960s. That orange picture there, that was his book that he wrote, I believe, in the 30s or 40s, called The Sexual Revolution.
Isn't it amazing how it seems like the same people are involved in the same thing to indoctrinate people? It's just amazing to me.
So that's just classic that you brought that up. Wilhelm Reich, I don't know if it was in this book or in one of the other books he wrote, was co-authored by another guy whose last name was Buttigieg. Yeah, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, like Pete Buttigieg.
Yeah, I think it was his grandfather.
Oh, of course. I'm telling you, it's the family trees.
It's his relative. But anyway, The basis of authoritarian state. So these are the things that you know, he believed that the authoritarian state was based on, you know, God, the church, tradition, parents, and that sexualization was the vehicle for destroying these relationships and the whole social order. The patriarchal family is the foundation and ideological training ground of all authoritarian social orders. A classless society required destroying traditional marriage and family, and sexualization of the masses, especially children, is the means to this end. So see, he saw everything that we tend to treasure in American ideals, you know, God, family, patriotism, um, uh, religion. He saw that as a threat or as the obstacle to the paradise that they believed, you know, they could create on earth. And so that had to be gotten rid of. And at the core of this is, he said, the way you take down the bourgeois society is to, or the modern society, is by sexualizing the children. Sexually active children are natural revolutionaries who rebel against authority. Revolutionary youth is hostile and destructive to the family. Therefore, they promoted it. Abolish the sex-negating structure of the family by using sexualization to release children and youth from their family ties. Promote behaviors starting at puberty to free the youth. And this last point is pretty key. We do not discuss the existence or non-existence of God. We merely eliminate the repressions and dissolve the infantile ties to their parents. Just let that sink in a minute. They don't have to teach kids that there is no God. All they have to do is sexualize them. And those children will dump God, and they'll dump their relationship with their parents. That was their ideal. That was their thinking. That's what they believed. And that's what is influencing public policy, curriculum, and what has infiltrated literally all of our higher institutions and agencies in the United States. Okay, if I talk a little bit about the bill, I'm going to go through this rather quickly because you're not all in Minnesota. But I just want to point out some of the key points because you're going to find them in legislation in your state. And so there's some key things that I think are good to be aware of as you listen to what's happening in your own state. On the Child Protection League, so cplaction.com is the quickest way to get to our website. There is a toolkit that talks about not just the bill in Minnesota, so that might be good for certain language samples for you, but also most of what I showed you already about CICUS and Planned Parenthood is in that toolkit.
Yeah, you can find a lot of this information that she's going over on the CPL, like also the website. There's a lot of information there, and I just dropped another link. So this was some of the wording from the legislation that you want to be aware of. We already talked about bodily autonomy, which is a code word for abortion and young people's right to be sexual with no parental involvement. Consent is another word to watch out for, because consent in their writing of legislation means affirmative, conscious, and voluntary agreement, excuse me, to engage in that activity. Consent, they are not teaching kids to say no. They're teaching kids to say yes. So watch for that word consent. Also, it allows unlicensed Planned Parenthood and gender identity activist groups into the classroom to teach. So basically,
This law, had this become law, it would have allowed the schools to bring in unlicensed teachers to teach these courses. Here's more exact wording from the bill. Provide students with information about local resources where students may obtain medically accurate information and services related to sexual and reproductive health, dating, violence, and sexual assault. In other words, it gave the schools the right to refer children to Planned Parenthood. Here's their way of manipulating opposition to the bill. And they would say, hey, it says right there in the bill that the legislation respects community values. Comprehensive sex ed, so this is our comment, violates community values and teaches students parental consent is not necessary. The curricula teaches students that sexual behavior is their right and nobody should stand in their way. I promise you, nobody held a town hall meeting. They didn't invite the public, you know, to share with them what our community values were. This is just garbage that means nothing in legislation, and it's designed to shut people up and to give them a defense when we rise up. And believe me, people rose up in Minnesota to go against this. Here's an example of what they show kids. Now tell me this isn't designed for little kids. This isn't what they show, you know, 11th graders. This is designed for little kids. And so it's the genderbread person. I swear, many of you have probably already seen this thing. This has been around for quite a while. It's, let's see if I have Minnesota Department of Health on here. Anyway, it's used by the Minnesota Department of Education staff to train teachers and administrators across the state in gender ideology. We are going to get into the details of gender ideology, but
yes, a gingerbread person. You would use, like, if you were teaching high school children, you would actually use something that represented a human being.
Yeah.
Not
There's another graphic that uses a unicorn. I mean, this is designed to manipulate young minds. All right, it's perfectly normal. You'll see right there at the top in the right-hand corner for ages 10 and up. This warning on the cover of the book is what we put on the book. It's not on the book. This book has sold millions of copies. We did just a cursory look in about, you know, I think maybe 50 to 70 schools in the Twin Cities metro area in Minnesota. I mean, we just one day had a volunteer call, and 27 of those schools had this book in their library. It was either in the teacher's library or the kids' library or the resource library. You know, it's anecdotal. It's by no means an exhaustive search, but this curriculum is promoted by Planned Parenthood. So we know this is the model curriculum of what they wanted mandated on schools to teach K through 12. And so this would have been what was appropriate for 10-year-olds.
And that picture's in that book. Holy blurred. When you said blurred and you didn't blur out the first one, I thought, oh, she must have forgot to blur it. That was the tame one. That picture I just looked at was oh my word. This is in that book?
This is in the book. So can I move on? Because I don't really like showing this stuff.
Yeah. I'm glad you are, though. I mean, that explains what they're pushing in schools. That's scary.
Don't you as a parent have a right? Don't you have a right to say whether they should show that to kids or not? I mean, you might be okay with it. You know, they're your children. I'm not going to tell you how to raise your children. And you have a right. But if you are opposed to it, don't you also have a right? You know, to know what's in the curriculum, to know what's being pushed on your kids, and to speak up. You know, the virtually no schools have opt-in. You know, they have opt-out policies where if you know about it, you might be able to opt out. But if 90% of the kids are being taught it, good luck, you know, sparing your kids from this kind of stuff, much less, you know, opt in. In my opinion, none of that is appropriate for children. Students feel, so CSE advocates say students feel more informed, make safer choices, and have healthier outcomes, resulting in fewer unplanned pregnancies and more protection against STDs. Really? Let's take a look at the facts.
I was going to say I did this in college, my speech over STDs, and that was 20 years ago. And the amount of STDs that are spread in the younger community because no one gets tested. That's how it spread. None of these young kids are getting tested for these diseases like gonorrhea or genital warts or things that can't ever be fully you can't prevent. I mean, you suppress suppress the what am I looking for? The effects of it, but you can't cure yourself of it. You're always going to have that. They don't tell children that you can't ever get rid of genital warts. You're always going to have them.
Right. So proponents of comprehensive sex ed say that it should be mandated on all the schools because it prevents STDs and it prevents pregnancies. So let's ask the question, does comprehensive sex ed being taught in schools prevent STDs? Well, this is from Washington State, believe this is CDC. And in 2013, they mandated comprehensive sex ed. And this was their chlamydia results over the following 5 years. Washington State again, the numbers on gonorrhea.
It's just shocking.
How about syphilis? So based on CDC facts, does comprehensive sex ed prevent STDs? There was another study done. This one was called Re-examining the Evidence for Comprehensive Sex Ed in Schools. This was done in 2019 or published in 2019 by the Institute for Research and Evaluation. So let's see what they found out. Out of 60 school-based comprehensive sex ed studies, we found no evidence of effectiveness at producing sustained reductions in teen pregnancy or STDs. One study showed evidence of effectiveness as defined above at delaying sexual initiation, but evidence from multiple replication studies couldn't confirm it. There was no evidence of effectiveness at increasing consistent condom use, the behavior required to provide meaningful protection from STDs, so that's their standard, and only 2 studies that were done by the program developers. You know, the fox watching the hen house, in other words. 2 studies reported effectiveness at increasing condom use frequency, but once again, those results couldn't be replicated by anybody else.
And remember, they're also pushing to tell them it doesn't matter how many partners you have. It's all fine and dandy.
Yeah, just use a condom.
Yeah.
We found no evidence of effectiveness for comprehensive sex ed purported dual benefit. There were no sustained increases in both teen abstinence and condom use by sexually active teens within the same target population. The failure rate at producing sustained effects on targeted outcomes included an 88% failure to delay teen sexual initiation and a 94% failure to reduce unprotected sex. And 7 out of the 60 studies, or 12%, actually had negative effects on adolescent sexual health and risk behavior. In other words, in 12% of the studies, it actually had the opposite effect. It increased. Not only did it not decrease the sexual behavior, it increased it. So some of you might be familiar with the REHYA, the Real Education for Healthy Youth Act of 2019. Pretty sure it's gone nowhere, but they're pushing it. Funds teacher training and grants for comprehensive sex ed to public or private entities. It just requires all of the same stuff, okay? So I'm talking to you about a bill that we are fighting here in Minnesota, and of course, in Congress, the same garbage is there. we'll have to continue to keep an eye on it. So we're
So
moving up the
Congress is pushing. Wait a minute. So Congress is pushing that slide previously. So they're saying that they'll provide grants if
they want to
schools can do this.
mandate. They want to mandate comprehensive sex ed on the schools. Yeah. When I worked at the Minnesota Senate, I only worked there for a little bit, couple years, 2.5 years. At that time, that was 8 years ago, there were 42 mandates on the public schools from the federal government. I have no idea how many there are now, but it's like a carrot and a stick. We'll give you money, but it comes with this mandate. So yeah, we'll give you money for training your teachers, but you're going to be required to teach this stuff to kids.
Well, you can tell me now if I'm coming out of turn here, but it seems like
Yeah.
this might be a good time to ask you about Betsy DeVos and what you feel like she's doing. If you feel encouraged or disappointed or
little of both.
Yeah.
There are some things I'm disappointed in, and there are some things that I'm encouraged by. And so I'm willing to kind of hold out my final decision on Betsy DeVos. We just, the Child Protection League just sent out an email. Please go to our website and sign up for our emails. You won't get a ton of emails, but you will get, maybe a couple a month that tell you what's going on. Well, we sent out an email in the past couple of weeks asking people to contact a certain individual at the Department of Education and tell them about the fact that the EBSCO, or the e-library system that schools provide to students for free, research databases, doesn't block porn. And so we're optimistic that the Department of Ed is willing to look at that. We're optimistic that that they have undone a lot of President Obama's directives and guidance that, like allowing boys who think they're girls to go into the girls', bathroom. So Betsy DeVos has done some good things, and I, can't recall off the top of my head, but there were some things that it looked like she was promoting that I was totally against.
And don't worry, we'll go into part 2. Will be EBSCO.
Yeah, I just can't remember what they were, but yeah, there was, there's still some things on standards, and generally I'm pleased with her, but data privacy, there's a lot that we have to be vigilant about and be in communication with them about. And, just as you on your channel have, discussed, really at length what draining the swamp actually looks like, and how much of these agencies are filled with people who don't hold our values, they don't share our ideals. This is true in the Department of Education as well.
Yeah, and I think that's why I said like part 2 will be over that EBSCO. So I know we might brush over it today, but trust me, part 2 will be over EBSCO, and then 3 will be the social.
Yeah.
And then 3 will be the social emotional learning, and then 4, I believe, what did we decide? There'll be some Planned Parenthood.
We decided sentencing guidelines. Yeah.
There we go. Okay.
Yeah. Social emotional learning, and then the whole data mining, tracking, data privacy issues we might be able to cover with social emotional learning. Well, I'd like to talk a little bit as we go up the ladder here. Of course, the cultural Marxism is no surprise to anybody coming through the UN. And so it's the same, the UN Global Youth Forum of the International Conference on Population and Development also talked about young people's rights, specifically calling on governments to create enabling environments and policies to ensure that young people have access to comprehensive sex ed. Here you have the World Health Organization. Well, they've got a really good reputation nowadays. For children age 0 to 4, give information about enjoyment and pleasure when touching one's body, enable children to gain an awareness of gender identity, give the right to explore gender identities, talk about unpleasurable feelings in one's body. So you've probably seen it. We've seen it. Schools where, they're all up in arms because we even had a school be sued because a guy who was really just right out of Chicago, community organizer, came, moved to Minnesota, put his kindergartner in a charter school, and then told the charter school that his little boy is now a girl, and he demanded that they read all kinds of gender neutral books, and it was a big deal. And then he pulled his child out of the school and then sued them. This is the kind of tactic. So it's not enough to just be tolerant of families that are dealing with children who may be gender confused. We should always be compassionate about what anybody is dealing with. But that's not the goal, and that's not the agenda. The agenda is you will accept it, celebrate it, affirm it, and believe it. That's the agenda.
Do you know how that lawsuit turned out? Did the parents win?
The school got sued, and I know the school settled, and I can't remember how many millions of dollars they got.
Well, it's encouraging to know that parents can kind of push back. You know what I mean? And that's what people need to do.
They pushed back. I don't know what the school is like now. That was a charter school. The public schools they're just caving right and left. But the charter school pushed back some.
That's encouraging.
Thanks to a number of really, concerned parents. That's what it took. Otherwise, the school would have caved. But it was the parents who stood up and said, "Oh no, not in our school." The activist guide. So this is the Yogacarta principles. So this is the application of international human rights law in relation to sexual orientation and gender identity. And it's just another example of what they're trying to implement across the globe. So we're getting a little bit beyond Planned Parenthood, SICAS, what's happening in the United States, to now the UN and what they're promoting across the globe. But it's the same agenda, as you can see. It's the same cultural Marxism meant to disrupt stable societies, and bring them down, because an unstable society is one that can be overthrown. So they demand that all countries of the world take totalitarian measures to change their constitutions, laws, social institutions, educational systems, and attitudes to enforce and legally compel acceptance and privileged status for homosexuality and gender identity. Here's this is really a line, I think, for a lot of people. Because if you're like me, and I think most people are like me, what you do in the privacy of your own home is none of my business. And how you live your life is none of my business. And so I kind of have a live and let live attitude. If I'm not infringing on your rights and you're not infringing on my rights, then we can get along. Where they stepped way over the line is when they started demanding that schools teach children that it is normal and healthy for a gender confused child to be treated like and behave like the opposite sex. And everybody is supposed to then just call that little boy a little girl, and we're all going to pretend that that little boy is a girl. And this is where parents said, "Oh, come on. I'm just not doing it. I'm not doing that to my kid." And so I think, it's like Laura, we talked a little bit about, post-birth abortion, right? I mean, just, what came out in the last several months in some of these states about born alive. And, there's just at some point, parents and common sense just says, this is ridiculous, and I think what we saw in the state of Minnesota and what we're seeing across the country is the same thing is true with gender confusion, that it crosses a line because it's just so obvious that you can't change the DNA in a person. You can't change one sex to another, and to force society to pretend that you can, and then to teach children that you can, is a form of child abuse.
Well, they used welfare to take fathers out of the home. They're using sex education in schools to take that away from parents,
Yeah.
to indoctrinate your child, sexualize your child. And we're not, and again, what shocks me, some of the things that we have talked about, me and you privately over the a couple years, is that the age. And here in my mind, I'm thinking not 15, 16-year old, like you said, it's not like it was when you were young. We're
Yeah.
talking about elementary school kids. We're
Yeah.
talking about 6 and 7 year olds. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what's shocking to me. As in,
Yeah.
these kids should be worried more about watching Sesame Street or going and playing going and playing in the sandbox, not having the gingerbread guy. I mean, it's
Yeah.
ridiculous. It's scary, quite frankly.
Yeah. It is really a serious level of indoctrination, exploiting those children for a political agenda, and exposing them, to really unhealthy behaviors and attitudes, and then forcing everybody to go along. Otherwise, you're a bigot, a homophobe, whatever, any other phobe you want to call it. The name calling is always meant to shut us up. But that is, as you all well know, that is their biggest fear, is that they can't keep us down, and that we will rise up and we'll start to get involved. So, this was a graphic. We held a rally last September, and this is a little bit about the point of the activism in this. We were able to stop this. There was a lot of people who thought, why would you hold a rally at the state capitol? And I'm going to change my screen here. Why would you hold a rally at the state capitol when the legislature is not in session? Well, this is where it's important for us to think strategically about how we do these things. One is, yeah, we were able to stop it last year, but we expected it was going to come back this year. And so we had to have a way to keep informing the public and to keep this issue hot in the minds of the public, so that they could keep it on the radar of the legislators, that no, we haven't forgotten about this. And you're darn right, we don't want it coming back next year. So we put on this rally called the Protect Kids Rally last September. And this is it's a 2-minute video of the rally. And I'll probably stop it partway through and just point out some things that I think are helpful for you to know, in terms of, okay, how do we fight this? And you'll be able to also, if I can get to that screen, Laura, but I gave you the links. Go to some of those other pages that, one is the toolkit on our website. If you go on under the CSE tab, you'll find all kinds of information. You can look up the laws in your own state. We have a link to an interactive map. We have a link to a sheet that would allow you a tool that you could go in and evaluate your local school's curriculum and determine, is it comprehensive sex ed? And I'll talk about that in a minute. And that'll be probably one of the last things we talk about. So here was just a video.
And Michelle, we've been dropping those in chat periodically through the show, by the way.
Okay. So it's a little bit of the rally that we held. There was about 800 people there. You always hope that there would be more. I know there was a Twins game and a Vikings game in the Twin Cities that day, but we were grateful for the people that came out. You'll see a picture, I might stop it when it comes up, of a number of legislators that showed up for it. This is Eric Lucero, great legislator in Minnesota. He was a great voice. We took out a billboard. Sometimes billboards work, sometimes they don't. I didn't think it was as effective for this campaign, but it's been effective in other campaigns. These are all legislators. I'll just let it go. Those were all legislators who attended our rally. A lot of great people, you know, some graphics we had done. Tamara Scott from Iowa is our MC.
But this is what it takes. I mean, it takes showing up. Like, you have got to keep the pressure on, because the minute you say, "Oh, they're not in session, we can just, you know, sit around," is the minute they try and slide something through under a policy, and there you are.
Yep. So we had signs printed up. You know, some people made their own signs. We had signs for people. So that gives you kind of the gist of it. Karen England is from California. The California Resource Institute is a great organization to follow. Some of my board members. It was really a great group of people. Those were our speakers, some of our speakers. Somebody did some graphics for us. Homemade signs. Awesome. We did some banners. Andrew Matthews, legislator, senator in Minnesota. I'll show you one guy running for U.S. Senate when his picture comes up. And then we'll wrap this up.
Well, and this is why you're here, because this is what you do. And so this is just like
there. That's Jason. That's Jason Lewis. He's running for U.S. Senate against Tina Smith here in Minnesota. And so it's grassroots, okay? That we're not like some of these organizations that's funded with millions of dollars, okay? We're a bunch of people who don't get paid for what we do. We just are sick and tired of them hurting kids. And you know, we're trying to create a better future for our grandkids and your grandkids, you know, one where they might be safe from this kind of garbage. And so, see if there's, I go back to the beginning. So I can stop that share.
Yeah, I think that's why it's so important what you do. I mean, I can't stress that enough. To me, you are what it takes. And that's why I hope people will rally around you and go visit your website and sign up for the newsletter. She really does put out a lot of really important information that I think that all of you would appreciate.
Yep, we're on Facebook. We're on Twitter, Child Protection League on Facebook. And our website is really a resource place for people to go, right? So you can find things that are tools for you and proof, you know, of the arguments that you're making. You want to go in armed. So, you know, some things we've learned over the years. You've got to fight this locally. You've got to fight all these battles locally. You know, Trump might give us back our country, but we're not going to keep it if we're not going to get involved right there in our neighborhood and start to rebuild after, you know, the swamp is drained. You know, what's going to fill it back up if it's not good people? And so very often what feeds the pipeline of candidates to the state house, state senate, U.S. Congress is people who were first elected to city council, county commissioner, and school board. And so get involved in those races. If you don't feel called to run for office, then help on those campaigns. Donate to those campaigns, you know, put up yard signs, do whatever you can, but do something to help those candidates get elected, because they do feed the pipeline. You know, if you're like me and years back, you're like, I can't believe what my choice is for president. Yeah, well, how involved were you, Michele? you know, in forming that choice. Get involved in your local party, whatever party you belong to, you know, and be a part of that. So that's the political side of it, right? That's Civic 101. And then there's the issue side of it. Like, there's a lot of issues, right? You guys cover, you know, most of them, I would imagine. It's a lot of issues, and some of them really cut to your heart. You know, some of them just keep you up at night, and others you're like, yeah, that's horrible, but your plate's too full. But then there's some that you know, just get under your skin, and so maybe you're being called to focus on that issue, and that's okay. You don't have to be the jack of all trades who knows everything about all issues. I guarantee you, you're not going to be able to. We focus on just, you know, a little more narrow umbrella. Yeah, it's our logo as an umbrella, but, you know, kind of a narrow policies and things that affect kids, because then we can produce some good stuff, you know, some quality research. And so we just focus on that and try to do a good job there. Maybe that's not your issue, but I hope that tonight what you walk away with is, first of all, an understanding that these comprehensive sex ed, the whole white supremacy, white privilege, equity in education, but especially comprehensive sex ed, is the tool that they are using to get to kids. And it is the tool that they're using to take down our country, because it doesn't matter what happens to us economically. If we lose the ability to maintain a standard here, and the only standard that's taught in comprehensive sex ed is consent. That's anything goes, whatever you want to do, as long as the two people consent. That's their only standard. And that's not working well for society, as you can tell. That's not working well for the sustainability of families. It's not working well for the mental health of children or adults. It's not working well for us economically either, because a family that is broken needs the government to step in.
And I have let you know that if there's any politicians that you're aware of, because I know your reach is especially in this country, far and wide. So if you know anyone that's running, just let us know. Let us know who's going to protect the kids. If you want they want to come on and speak about their policies, what they like to try and do. You know me, Michelle, I'm open for that.
Yeah, I do know some, and I'll pass them on to you, or come on with them and introduce them, and we can talk a little bit. I know, you know, some of the candidates are running for U.S. Congress, and then a number of them on the Minnesota state level.
Well, and before we close, go ahead.
Well, I'm just wondering if resource-wise and activism-wise, what haven't I covered?
Well, we dropped that out of what parents need to find out and ask. Mm-hmm. I would say probably the next show, if you wanted to tease a little bit about that. And, you know, when we go to the sentencing and stuff like the EBSCO.
Okay. So two more things that I would suggest. One is that if this is your issue, if you're called to this issue, and I hope you are, because I think this is key, we all need to be aware of it, and we all need to fight back to some extent. But if this is one you're willing to get up and run with, like, no, you're so concerned about what your grandchildren or your children are going to experience this year, that you need to know if this stuff is in your schools right now, then I would suggest that you get a couple of parents together, and these resources are on our website, and you can contact me from the website as well, and we'll help you. Even if you're in another state, we'll at least get you the tools that you need. And don't ever go with just one person. Go with a few people, and go to your school board or to your superintendent, either way, and tell them you want to see the sex ed curriculum that they're using. And I'll give you an example of what happened in one of our school districts here. A group of parents went to the school board, and they said, look, we're concerned, and we want to know what's going on in this school district. They were invited in to look at the curriculum. And they took a tool from our website that's called the 15 Harmful Elements of Comprehensive Sex Ed. And they brought that tool with them and they measured it against the curriculum that they were shown. And the school told them, no, we don't have comprehensive sex ed here. We use abstinence education. And so they measured it and they said, well, your abstinence education has 12 of the 15 harmful elements of comprehensive sex ed. So in our opinion, you're pretty close to having comprehensive sex ed. And so that was an example of the tool that we provided them that allowed and equipped them to go in and address that with the school district. And now they're working, with that school district and in hopes to clean that up. So that's a good place to start. So coming up next week, we're going to talk about EBSCO. And, this is shocking. If you think the pictures that I showed you in comprehensive sex ed were bad, just wait till I show you what they allow children to see when they use the free data research databases that the schools are provided by a company called EBSCO. And once again, we're going to have to, blur them out, but they are not protecting children from graphic material when they use the school computers, their tablets, their iPads that the school issue, or maybe they're doing work in the school library, or they're doing work at home, but they're going through the school website to use the school's free data research services. They're provided by a company called EBSCO. And this has been proven all across the country that EBSCO doesn't filter this stuff out. So we'll show you how that is true. We'll show you what happened when we FOIA'd the largest school district in Minnesota asking for their contracts with EBSCO, and what we're doing next with that issue, because that's an ongoing battle. Is that our next one? Is EBSCO?
Yeah. EBSCO, okay. And then, EBSCO, and then it's the social emotional learning.
Okay. Well, I got to get some work done before we do the EBSCO, because there's already a video on our YouTube channel, but I'll show you how to do it. I'll show you how to go into your child's school district website, and I'll show you how if you're a little kid, maybe you heard something on the playground, maybe you heard something on Family Guy, or some TV show, and you were just curious and you typed it in. That school is supposed to filter that stuff out, but we're going to show you how they don't. And we should be able to. It depends what examples I use. Even in benign searches, even in searches like on diabetes, topics came up, articles came up, graphic links to pornographic websites have come up. So it's not just searching for, certain terms. Sometimes this stuff just accidentally comes up. EBSCO said they cleaned it up. They didn't clean it up, and we proved that they didn't clean it up. And so it's an ongoing thing. It's what we're dealing with now, hopefully with the Department of Education, and we'll get them involved and Betsy DeVos involved, because this is all across the country. So we'll talk about that, social emotional learning, and then our last one will be on the sentencing guidelines, which we'll tell you more about that as we get closer. Thank you, Laura.
You're welcome. And I'll just add, just remember what she just said. When she comes on here next Thursday at 8 Eastern, reminder, that she will have to blur out the images that they're showing to your kids. And I mean, that should stick with everyone. That she has to worry about blurring that out for a room full of adults that they're sharing with small kids.
Yeah.
And so I just, how I feel about you. You are I have so much respect for what you do, Michele.
Thank you.
I really do. I'm very fortunate that we met, and we've kept in contact this whole time. Yep. You always have a place to come here and share whatever it is you feel like needs attention, and I will do whatever I can to give it to you and use this channel to get it.
Yeah. We're an organization that, we would like to not have to be an organization, right? That would be our dream come true. would be the day we close up shop because we're not needed. We don't want to become a big organization. Nobody wants a full-time job here. It's just a calling, you know, and so people just get the truth from us. They just get good quality research, and we don't care where the truth takes us. We've angered both sides in the past because we just want kids to be protected.
And I'm going to share this really quickly. This is the Child Protection League's website. If you look over here to the right, this is where you sign up for their newsletter. They do not spam you, but this is a website that you need to sign up for, especially if you have anybody that knows that has children, that somebody that knows someone that has children. I mean, they go through a lot of information here, and I mean, it's a lot. So again, I encourage you, if there's a website that you sign up for, this would be the one to do it, especially if you have children or know anyone with children. And with that, I think we're probably going to wrap it up for the night,
Great.
unless you have anything else to add, Miss Michele.
Just thanks, and keep fighting the good fight, people. It's worth it.
Okay, and with that, guys, thank you so much for joining us here this evening with Michele. She will be back next Thursday at 8 again, Eastern, and we'll go over the EBSCO. And with that, I will let you guys go for the evening. Thank you for the ones that joined us tonight, and this will be on the channel. So if you want to catch up and watch it later, it will be there for you. And with that, me and Michele will say good night, and thank you for being here.
Bye-bye.